Hi, folks. I realize that some of us haven't actually met in person, but I feel connected enough to be able to share a moment of jargon. No, not that jargon. Thanks. But a moment of one of my favorite developmental issues, words of jargon. And that word is biopsychosocial, which in a way is three words put together into one long jargony word. And biopsychosocial is a word or an amalgam of words that is used to describe an approach to understanding human behavior as multi-determined and multifaceted. Or, to say another way, a way of saying that our behavior has a bunch of different causes and roots, and that if you ask me where I stand on this, or ask someone who believes in along with me in this theory, they would say, I believe in a biopsychosocial approach. It's a great line to drop at next icebreaker at a party. You can go with that. Let's unpack this a little bit. Bio. Of course, here we learned about some of these things already, so this is a little bit of a review. The neurology and brain structures and development, our hormones, which is something we didn't talk much about in class, genes, our overall health. So when we look at causes of our behavior, all of these things are part of that story. But of course, they're not the only part of the story. We've got the psycho part, and this is not referring to any Hitchcock movies, but it refers to what's going on in our head, so to speak. Our attitudes, our cognitive processes, emotional reactions and states, beliefs, temperament, all are part of that story of who we are and what we do. And there is, as much as in the Bronfenbrenner unit I went and stressed some of the social and role issues, there are elements that are part of who we are in that internally. And those are finally, we've got social. This relates back very strongly to the Bronfenbrenner work and also the Vygotsky work, that we exist in a social context, and our peer, school, family, and their associated roles and norms impact and help drive our behavior and help make us who we are. Now, of course, we learned with Bronfenbrenner that there's reciprocal impact, so we also impact on our social environment. But let's put that aside for a second, because now we're talking about what helps drive our behavior. So if you've got, what you've got is this term, which is a long and somewhat messy term for what is a complicated and somewhat messy set of influences or set of descriptions of what's behind our behavior and what's behind who we are and how we present ourselves, which are all not all exactly the same thing, but have some overlap in this case. So what I'm going to tell you now is to take a deep breath, because the next slide could get kind of complicated, but I'll walk you through it. So, got it? Drum roll, please. Yeah, that was it. What we have here, and I'll just put these, just to make things a little more complicated, I'll put these back to remind you what they are, is showing you that the three elements of this word impact on one another. And if I did this right, then each part should be connected both as cause and as effect. So an arrow pointing to and an arrow pointing away from each other. And so what this is saying is that our biological makeup influences our social functioning. and how we interact with our surroundings. That's the big red arrow on the bottom. And at the same time, our social environment impacts on our biological makeup, which is the big arrow pointing across the top. And the same could be said for the other, our biology makeup impacting and being impacted by our internal psychological states, belief systems, emotional states, and also our internal psychological makeup influencing our interactions in the social environment and also being influenced by those. So even though biopsychosocial is a messy word, I do think it's an important one to keep in mind. And I'm going back, way back to all the way at the beginning, we talked a little bit about the fundamental attribution bias, which is our tendency to attribute causes to behavior, or to kind of assume reasons why person X does something. And we tend to do it somewhat simplistically, and we tend to do it in a way that doesn't give person X a break. We assume that they did something wrong because they're a bad person and will always be a bad person. I think that if we keep biopsychosocial in mind, we realize that there are many different things that could drive any given behavior at any given time, and I see that as in a way, it's empowering in that I could let go of some of the assumptions and attributions that sometimes I find myself making, and it becomes almost kind of a corrective thought that things are more complicated, and therefore don't jump to conclusions. And there are those who might say, well, it's actually the opposite. It's too complicated. I can't think this way. And yes, we all have to function in the world, so we all take shortcuts sometimes, and we have to proceed as if we knew certain things. But I think it's also helpful to keep in mind that when it comes to understanding our behavior and the behavior of others, there's a complex set of interactions that we really we may never know, in a sense, especially when it comes to understanding someone else's behavior.